An overflow crowd is expected tonight at Sacramento's City Council meeting, where public comments will be heard on the police shooting of Stephon Clark. Clark was shot and killed by Sacramento police who thought he was holding a gun. Only a cell phone was found near his body. After Stephon Clark's death, his grandmother begged police for answers.
Why did you just shoot him in the arm, shoot him in the leg, send a dog, send a taser? Why? Why? Y'all didn't have to do that.
That is a common question after these shootings. Why did police have to use deadly force? Why not shoot someone in the leg or the arm or tase them? Officers will tell you, though, they are trained to shoot to kill in life-threatening situations for a good reason. So let's talk about that. I'm going to ask my panel of experts, and I want your opinion, too, Opinion Nation. Should America's police departments reconsider use of force? Tweet me at CarolHLN or find me on Facebook at facebook.com/CarolHLN. Joining me now is David Klinger. He's a professor of criminology and criminal justice at the University of Missouri, St. Louis. Billy Murphy is an attorney for the family of Freddie Gray, who died in police custody in Baltimore. And Lance LoRusso is an attorney, former law enforcement officer, and author of Blue News. Welcome to all of you. I'm going to start with you, Lance. Why don't officers aim for a leg or an arm when they feel their life is in danger?
Well, first of all, shooting someone in an arm or a leg is deadly force. There are arteries that run through your arm or your leg that can cause just as much injury. And the bottom line is the officers are shooting for the largest target available. That's why they're trained to shoot center of mass. That way they don't hit an innocent subject. The bottom line is that if you shoot someone in any area of their body, you stand a high chance of causing a serious bodily injury or death. That's why there are prescribed standards and rules about when they can use deadly force.
And keep in mind that officers are often shooting at a moving target. I mean, David, how good of a shooter would you have to be to hit someone's ankle, for example, as they're running from you?
Well, there's a few things. So first, I hate to correct you off the bat, but you said police officers are trained to shoot to kill. They're not. They are trained to shoot to stop the threat. In terms of shooting at someone if they're running away, there's a very narrow band of circumstances where you're allowed to do that as a police officer. You have to have a probable cause to believe that they've committed a violent felony. Absent that, you can't shoot. The bottom line, I have to just echo what your first guest had to say in terms of it's always deadly force. But in terms of your question about the likelihood of striking someone in an ankle, very, very low. And because most of the time police officers don't shoot to stop someone in flight, they shoot when at least they perceive that their life or the life of a third party is in jeopardy. You have to remember that a gun or a knife, if you shoot somebody in the leg or in the arm, if they've got a gun or a knife, they can still attack you. And certainly if they have a gun, they can still shoot.
Billy, your thoughts on this?
I think that we're going in the wrong direction. And I think we're going in the wrong direction for political reasons rather than safety reasons, rather than being reasonable. I think there's a large cohort of America that believes that the cops should be protected no matter what, and that they should be given the benefit of any doubt. And there are others in this community that say no. You have to look at the facts. You have to look at the facts very carefully to determine whether or not under the circumstances the police officer's shooting or use of deadly force was justified. We've come a long way away from that with the help of the Supreme Court. And on Monday, the Supreme Court decided that a woman who had gotten shot, who was breaking no law, who was in the backyard with a knife in her hand, not moving aggressively towards another person, who may not have heard them at all, according to the police officers themselves, shot her, and the Supreme Court found that there was no violation of established law when they shot unreasonably. That's just nonsense, as Justice Sotomayor pointed out in her dissent. But it was a 7-2 majority opinion that makes it much harder to bring justice to these situations when the police have behaved badly. And so you have to add that to the equation as well.
And they are adding that to the equation in the city of Sacramento. There's this social justice group. They want to, like, have local lawmakers introduce legislation to restrict when police officers can open fire. So the proposal would change the current reasonable force rule to a necessary force standard. Lance, do you understand what that would mean?
Well, you know, it's really interesting, and that's an interesting version of the facts that you just heard about that Supreme Court case. I don't agree with them. When we look at the use of force, law enforcement policies, procedures, the mechanics of the use of force, what an officer does is not created in Hollywood. It's not created by lawyers. It's created by facts, by peer-reviewed research. We know in action-reaction situations, as you saw with the person with the knife, he was actually close enough to you to be a deadly threat, twice the distance where you shot. The first person that you showed behind the desk, we've heard a lot of the buzzword of de-escalation. Officers can de-escalate, but it takes two people to de-escalate a situation. The commonality that we see in these situations is the officers can de-escalate all they want, but the bottom line is we know in the mechanics of use of force that people move. So when we see someone shot in the side or in the back, that does not necessarily mean that the officer was behind them when they pulled the trigger. We have people that are shot, they fall, they move in reaction to shots. And one of the things that we've seen in the shooting in Sacramento is everybody saying he was shot 7 times in the back. If you look at the autopsy pictures, even the medical director who took the autopsy says the first shot was in the side. The rest of those shots are in the flank on the side that was facing the officers, and the officers believed he had a firearm. So you can't retrospectively go back and say, well, now we know in completely dark conditions that it was a cell phone, so everything the officers did is incorrect. Their tactics are based on research.
And I hear you, but David, I will say, there is a lack of trust in many communities across the country when it comes to community members and police. So something clearly is wrong here. So what might fix the problem?
Well, I think one of the things is looking to the law to address things has some liabilities. So Billy was talking about the Supreme Court. I've been arguing, as well as some other people have been arguing, what we should do in terms of civil remedies is move it to state courts. Let the states write laws that would permit people to sue the police when the police do something wrong. The bigger thing, I think, however, is tactics. Now, I didn't see the video that was shown, but you said you thought he had a knife and so you shot. Why are you that close to someone that you believe has a knife? Now, you're not a trained police officer, but a trained police officer should be further away. And if we think about some of the more egregious and more controversial shootings that have happened recently, for example, down in Baton Rouge with Mr. Sterling, why in the world those officers approached him the way that they did created a huge tactical dilemma for them. And so I think that if police officers get better training about issues such as creating space and then verbal communication, how do you appropriately give commands to people? Why, for example, do you want to see someone's hands when their hands are hidden from you? Because if you say, show me your hands immediately, they start to move their hand, you are behind the time loop that Lance is talking about, and you as a police officer are actually creating a greater threat. So there's a bunch of things we could talk about to try to frame things so that fewer shootings occur.
Would moving it to state courts work, Billy?
No, unless the state courts have adequate insurance to compensate people if the police officers are found to be wrong. In Maryland, for example, for reasons that have always eluded all of us, the city of Baltimore does not carry liability insurance. And that means that they always argue that you're taking money from the general public to compensate innocent victims, and they put caps on these recoveries. So in Baltimore, the most you can get for a catastrophic injury is $200,000. It's been raised recently to $300,000, but that's totally inadequate in these kinds of cases.
That's not hard.
We've tried to change the law. But here's where the Supreme Court comes in. Because caps prevent adequate recoveries, because municipalities don't get insurance, cases are more and more being tried in the federal court under Title 18, Section
1983.
And so, 1983, thank you. So that presents additional difficulties because the Supreme Court has come up with a court-made doctrine called qualified immunity, instead of treating the police in these cases, who are very, very well trained compared to citizens, under the same legal principles as citizens would be treated. Now, let me give you an example. When you use the gun during training,
you can't do that.
You had a duty to retreat if you're a citizen, And
Citizens
you had a
don't
duty
get
move
paid
to
to
a
use
place
force.
of safety.
Citizens don't get
Well, I
paid to use
understand
force,
that, but
sir.
the
Law
principles-
enforcement does.
And
law enforcement
that
doesn't get
doesn't
paid to
matter.
back down. They get paid to respond. And the commonality of these shootings
No,
over and over
not
again
true.
is people not complying with law enforcement officers. In Alton Sterling's case, this gets lost. The officers responded to a person menacing people and threatening them with a gun. There were people in the area. That's why they closed the distance to try to make
You
sure
and I are going to have
that
to
they could
debate
protect
this
the
because
people.
that was pathetic police work. That was pathetic police work.
We're just going to have to disigree on that. I think they had very limited options.
I sure wish I could go on, but thank you all for your input because it's an important topic.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. I'll be right back.